We are back with our investment analysts Ismail Ibrahim and Fahad Sheikh from Oasis Group Holdings and continuing our discussion on the South African economy. Earlier, Ismail had talked about, in terms of fuel prices, that, dollar prices were the same year on year, but the impact of the weaker currency has come through in terms of inflation. Now, if you look at currency from a currency perspective, how does it impact us in terms of our competitiveness as a country?
Hassan, you're very right. Ismail pointed out that as our currency weakens, it does have negative implications from an inflation perspective, because a lot of products, for example, oil or fuel that you're importing from overseas, actually becomes more expensive. But I think there's the other positive side to it as well. I think the most important factor that we shouldn't lose sight of is that a weaker currency is very favorable for exporters. So, we've seen that if you take Cape Town as an example, we've seen very recently that as the currency weakened, we saw a lot more tourists coming into South Africa, and even especially Cape Town. And I think the key reason behind that is that it's a lot cheaper for them to come to Cape Town or to South Africa. Similarly, we've seen the film industry. Increasingly the film industry is coming into South Africa to do their shootings because it's a lot cheaper compared to some of the more developed parts of the world. And you get trickle-down effects from that. So, for example, more tourism, higher number of filmmakers coming to South Africa, that actually bodes very favorably for firstly job creation, and then secondly industries like restaurants, like your hotels, just the services industry. It does give a very significant boost to that. Then the second angle of it is that as your currency weakens, it discourages imports. So for normal consumers, it actually incentivizes you to buy locally produced product. Because at the end of the day, obviously, just because of the currency weakening, your imported product is more expensive. So if you were to look at the overall picture, what a weaker currency is actually doing, it's incentivizing exports, it's incentivizing domestic consumption of domestically produced goods, and it's incentivizing money flowing into the country. Whereas on the flip side, it's disincentivizing imports. So I think this whole mechanism bodes very favorably from a trade account, from a current account perspective as well.
So Ismail, we are seeing, for example, as Fahad has highlighted, that the currency, we're already seeing tourist numbers, you're seeing the likes, as he said, of other industries or service-related industries benefiting from that as well. Are we seeing the export-related industries benefiting from this currency competitiveness that we have?
Sure. So you're talking about the currency competitiveness. Now, if we look at our exports, key export industries for us has been mining, which contributes almost more than 50% of our exports. But apart from that, another industry which has been key is your vehicle manufacturing sector. And those two sectors both have recently experienced significant industrial action. We had a 6 to 7 month strike in the mining sector with the platinum guys out on strike, and now we're experiencing almost 220,000 workers indirectly affecting the vehicle manufacturing sector. And the mining guys, they were about 70,000 workers. So from that point of view, we actually have an opportunity with our goods being a lot more competitive, but we're not taking advantage of it at this point in time. Key for us is to actually get back to work and increase our productivity and increase our competitiveness. If we can prove this to some of the international companies, we'll see increased foreign direct investment in our country. We've already seen examples of that with the likes of Amazon investing. We've seen JX Nippon, a Japanese oil producer, the largest of its kind in Japan, actually investing in head offices in South Africa. And then in Cape Town, we've seen Hisense out in Atlantis actually increasing in a production plant. So that's obviously positive. But from that point of view, it's key that we actually get back to work in order to increase our output, so we can then take advantage of the competitive advantage that we're actually in, the situation that we're in. Now, from an individual's perspective, we can also play a role. I think we spoke about it the other day, where, the first revelation in the Quran, Iqra. So, read, expand your knowledge. And what does that give you as a Muslim? It gives you a competitive advantage. If you increase your productivity, if you increase your knowledge, you actually become more efficient and more productive than the next man. And from that point of view, if we can all do that, and if we can all play our individual role, we actually improve the capacity of our country and improve the productivity. So going forward, if we look at what we spoke about last week, we said the electricity is being fixed, and we're not far off from that coming through. The infrastructure is being fixed from a transport perspective, with Transnet improving our capacity from an export in the ports and in the transport and rail infrastructure. That's being fixed. And now goods are more competitive from a currency perspective and a cost perspective. So all that needs to be done is for us as workers to in fact increase our productivity. And we can then take advantage of that. And that provides that opportunity which Fahad spoke about to get back to that 5% range of growth, which will be exceptional and a fantastic opportunity for us.
I think you hit the nail on the head. I think it says, nobody has not benefited from working hard. You work hard, you stand and see the benefits of it longer term as well. Fahad, just on that, in terms of, we've got this competitive advantage. What sectors stand to benefit on the export side?
Historically, if you look at, I think Ismail indicated from mining has been one of the key sectors which contributes to South Africa's exports. But I think the interesting thing, which I'm not sure if many people notice, is how the mix of the mining sector has changed compared to history. I mean, if you go back almost 20, 25 years, gold used to be a significant contributor from a mining perspective. But now, despite the contribution of gold decreasing quite substantially over the last 20, 25 years, our mining production has continued to increase. And that's largely been driven by areas like iron ore, manganese, even copper to a large extent. So all these sectors, from an export perspective, from a growth perspective, have done relatively well. So I think it's a point that this should be appreciated. Secondly, so as you indicated, as we get more competitive, these sectors of the mining industry should benefit. Then the second area where South Africa has done very well is in terms of the motor vehicle production. We've seen the likes of VW, Mercedes, BMW, even GM have manufacturing facilities located in South Africa. So, with the currency weakness that we've seen, it actually makes them a lot more competitive. But again, as Ismail pointed out, it all comes down to the fact that we have this opportunity, but it's up to us as individuals to take advantage of that, to increase our efficiency, to increase our productivity, and take advantage of this opportunity.
Ismail, in fact, you highlighted earlier a company like Hisense, Chinese company setting up here, manufacturing base here. Everyone thinks of China as obviously manufacturing everything in their country as being, but they've actually set up here in our hometown and setting up a manufacturing base producing goods, not only for the South African market, but also looking at the African continent. How significant are opportunities in terms of exports into the African continent?
What we've seen is, if we look at what Africa needs, Africa provides, geographically, South Africa is at a huge advantage relative to the rest of the world. Africa, on our doorstep, we actually have that opportunity to take advantage of this. With Africa's rising wealth, we've discussed this before. You've got the infrastructure requirements that Africa needs, so that increased investment bodes well for our mining sector because we've got significant mineral resources that are required to construct those bridges, build those roads that they require. From a vehicles perspective, as these consumers in Africa get more wealthy, they actually start buying vehicles. Their younger generation, their middle income earners actually start investing in vehicles. From a platinum point of view, that's also positive. We require for the vehicles. But not only from a platinum resource point of view, you also, like I just spoke about earlier, the vehicle manufacturing sector we can export those VW Polos that we manufacture right in our country. And then also finally, if I can just touch on, the skill set that South Africans have. We've seen examples of different sectors exporting skills to Africa, but that's actually a service that we're exporting to other countries. It's a form of an export. For example, you've had some of our farmers going into other African countries to help and assist in developing their agricultural sector. For example, you've got guys in the financial services sector, normal auditors, actually doing audits of other African countries or companies based in other African countries right here in South Africa because our financial services sector is held in such a high regard. You've got skills in, for example, telecommunications. As these countries build out their telecommunication infrastructure, we've had our skills. We've gone through that curve. We've gone through a development curve, and we've got the skill set and the experience to assist them in building that out. Now, two companies that we've actually mentioned before, and it sounds like we're actually, mentioning them quite a bit, but that's only because there's such a fantastic opportunity. RCL Foods, significant opportunity. They've got that skill set in supply chain management, in managing the poultry and the logistics process to deliver to those food franchises, for example, and deliver to the consumer. So they, for example, will benefit significantly. We've touched on the exposure to Zambia, for example. And then also, we mentioned Pallinghurst. Now, that's a company, like I said, I've spoken before, and I've said that, they've got significant resources that can actually supply to that vehicle sector, that can actually supply the manganese that's required in the steel to build the bridges and, assist in the development of roads and infrastructure in the rest of Africa.
Sure. Gentlemen, once again, thank you very much for giving the views and insight in terms of the macro conditions, both from a South African perspective, but also from an African and a global perspective as well. Until we meet again, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.